I was recently thinking about the year end, and I often will do this where I'll look back on the year that's just passed. And one of the ways that I do that is I go through all the journals that I've written. And this is a stack of most of the journals I've written for this particular year. Each one is about 200 pages. And so that means I've probably written close to 1,000 pages. This is something that I picked up years ago from reading Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. And she talks about this idea of morning pages where you'll write like 3 pages or something in the morning. So this is just a habit that I've gone through over the years. And I start almost every day with this, probably maybe up to an hour. And it's just a way for me to process what's going on, the thoughts that I'm having, things I'm thinking about, the goals that I have, the problems, the challenges I'm having. And at the end of the year, when I do this, inevitably I think back on the year that's just passed. Doing this leads to me thinking about what are the things that I'll remember from this year? Are there 1 or 2 things that I'll remember from this year just passed? And I'm surprised when I'll go back through the journal, I'll realize like, oh yeah, I did that this year. And sometimes a year can seem like not a long time, but sometimes it can seem really long, especially if I'm going back through and I'm not seeing what's in the past. So this led me to this question of, if I were to go back over the last couple of years, what are the things that I would remember from each year? And I don't mean the news headlines or the things that happened external to me, but more the things that I accomplished in my life, the things that I did, the things that were important, the milestones, the achievements that I had in my life. That's what I'm thinking about when I look back at that year. So if I were to look back at the last 5 years, going back to 2020 or even before that, it was interesting to me when I started to think about year by year. I asked myself, what's the one thing that I would remember from that particular year? So an example for me, if I were to think back over the last 5 years, the one thing that stands out for me the most was the year 2023, because that's the year that I gave a TEDx talk in Anchorage, Alaska in February. And there are so many things about that stood out as a memory. Not only it was a TEDx talk, which is a huge deal, but it was also in Anchorage in February, tons of snow, dark. It was just such an unusual, interesting experience. So if I was to look back and say definitively of the last 5 years, the things that I remember the most, I could always go, oh yeah, 2023, that was the year that I gave the TEDx talk. And the fact that I could look back at that year in particular and always go, that was the year I did that, it made me think, do I have the same sort of level of accomplishment in the other years? Like if I said, what happened last year? Well, last year, 2024, well, my father passed away. So that is something that will stand out for that reason. But when I think about the things that I accomplished that year, probably the thing that stands out most for me was that was the year I became a minister. So I finished up the program, went through the oral panels, the test, a lot of it, but I could probably, I bet 5 years from now, I'd say that was the year that happened. Also, the year that I got my doctorate in consciousness studies. That's the thing I remember most from 2024. Now, if I was to go back to 2023, that of course is the year that I did the TEDx. So now I've got 2 years covered. And it's funny, the reason that I started down this path and started thinking about this was I thought, well, what will I remember from this year? And at first I thought, well, I don't have anything like the TEDx talk that immediately stands out. And then I realized, wait a second, I went to Paris this year. That was a huge deal because that was something I'd wanted to do for a long time. And I at first I was like surprised that I couldn't remember that right off the top of my head, or I was like, I didn't really do anything this year. And then I'm like, yes, you went to Paris. So that was a huge deal. I did other things this year, like I published a book, a second book. Gosh, now that I think about it, it really is Paris. That's like the big thing that stands out for me. There were other things I did. I taught a class. I wrote a novel. See, this is how funny this is, that things don't always stand out in the way that you think they would. But in July, I wrote 50,000 words of my first novel, still working on finishing that. But that was a huge thing. I'd never written a novel before, so maybe this will be the year that I remember that. 2022, at first I was really having a hard time trying to remember what I did that year. As it turns out, probably the things that I would remember, I finished a practitioner program, so I got my license, similar to, that was like a stepping stone to becoming a minister. So that was kind of a big deal. The other thing, and I had to go back through my journals to remind myself of this, February of that month, or that year, I decided to publish a book that had been kind of sitting unpublished for a long time. It was actually funny, I started it in 2018 when my daughter went off to college. And I'd never published it, I'd written it, and it was mostly done. It just needed to be finished and put into the software to format it, the interior of the layout and the cover design. So in February of that year, I made the goal. I said, you know what, I'm going to produce this book by spring, by May. And I did. So that's probably the thing I'd remember about 2022 was my book. I'm going back another year, 2021. I'm sure there were things that happened that year, but nothing that stands out to me in the same way that the TEDx talk did. 2020, pandemic year, obviously. I moved in with my dad that year to take care of him because we couldn't have someone come into his house safely to take care of him, and he needed care. So that was a big year. I started in the fall of that year, I started the practitioner program. That whole class was almost 200 hours, I guess, by the time I was done 2 years later. But 2020, not much stands out from that year. 2019, my mom passed away. Got to go a couple months later, took my dad on a trip, which turned out to be his last vacation ever, where he went away. And then if I'm going back one more year, 2018 was the year that my daughter went off to college. And that was probably, it was huge because it was the year that she graduated from high school and then a couple months later went to college, which ended up being a hugely painful experience for me, letting go of your kid and then saying, now what? What do I do now with my life? And that led me sort of on the journey that I'm on now. So that's going back 7 years to 2018. And if I think about what stands out, and like I said, the TEDx talk is the thing that stood out for most for me. So as I was thinking about this and going, why is that? I asked the question, why does that thing in particular stand out to me? And why do the other things like publishing a book or becoming a minister, which those are huge things, but why do they not stand out for me in the same way? The question that I ask myself is, why do we remember some things and not others? Why do I remember the TEDx experience and that is so easy for me to recall and place in a specific year, but why do we not remember other things? And I think it's this. I think that things that are new or extremely unique or completely outside of our experience are the things that we remember. In my TEDx talk, I actually talked about this, about why we remember certain things. And in the talk, I refer to some scientific research that shows that the brain encodes new experiences differently. And so I think the reason why the TEDx experience is so memorable for me was because it was something I'd never done before in my life. If I compare that to like writing books, I've done that. I know how to write, but that is mostly work that I do in my office. It's work I do at home. It's not unique. The TEDx experience was a new location, a new time setting. It was February in Anchorage, Alaska. It was dark, it was cold, there was tons of snow. So there's so many things about that that were new and unique in a way that other things that I've done just didn't stand out. And it was also like a finite period of time where I went up there on a Wednesday and came back on a Sunday, I think. So it was a condensed amount of experience all in one time. And so I remember that in ways that the other things I don't. I've done a lot since then. I could say I've published several books. I have become a minister, received a doctorate, a lot of accomplishment, but nothing stands out quite like that. So as I think about the year ahead, one of the things that I've been really focused on is asking the question, is there something like the TEDx talk on my calendar Or am I thinking big enough in life to where there's an experience like that? And I have to say at this point, probably the answer is no, to be honest. I don't see anything like that I'm anticipating yet. Though, I will say I am thinking about doing another TEDx talk, and it's possible that that could still happen in the year ahead. It's just not something on my radar right now because I haven't applied and I don't have a sense of that calendar. And my last one was something I didn't even apply for until August, and then it happened in February the following year. So it's certainly possible that something could happen like that next year where I'm not anticipating it. But I do think about my year, and when I'm thinking about planning the things ahead, I do want those sort of new experiences. Now, I will say the one thing that I do know that's on my list of goals for 2026 is to run a marathon. Years ago, in my 30s, I trained for the LA Marathon, and I got up to like the 22-mile run and ended up getting injured and I couldn't complete it. So that marathon experience was something that was on my list of things that I wanted to do one day, but I hadn't done yet. So next year, I intend to check that off in the fall at some point. So that may be actually, if I was to think 5 years from now, I might be like, oh yeah, 2026, that was the year I did the marathon. The other big thing that I want to do next year is, for the work that I do in the world, I want to launch a program in the fall for parents who are new empty nesters to sort of help them get through that experience in a way that I didn't have that experience, and I wished I'd had that experience back in 2018 when I first became an empty nester. So that's one of my big focuses for next year, is launching that program. And again, that may be something where the success of that and the success of running a marathon, maybe those will be the things that I look at 5 years from now and go, oh yeah, 2026, that was the year I did that thing. So my takeaway for this is, as you think about your year ahead, and whenever you're watching this, think about 12 months from now when you're watching this, what are things that are on your horizon that you think you will remember 5 years from now, 10 years from now, where you will say, oh yeah, that was the year I did that. I know for me, the answer for that is increasingly to think bigger than I've ever thought of before. Like if I were to say 2 years from now, 3 years from now, one of my goals is to take that novel that I worked on this year and to eventually publish it where it's in bookstores. I can imagine, and I think this is one of the things that motivates me, is I want to see my book in an airport bookstore when I'm traveling somewhere to go speak somewhere, and then I look at it and there's my book in the airport bookstore. I suspect that'll be something that I remember. I also have a goal to do a show on Netflix, and I imagine that will probably be one of those experiences years from now where I'll look back and go, oh yeah, that was the month that we filmed that show, or that was the month that it came out and we promoted it. So I think about my own life and go, I need to think way bigger than what I've thought before. And that, I believe, will be the way to help in the future be able to look back and go, yes, that was the year I did that. So as you look at your year ahead, whether it's 2026 or whenever you watch this, ask yourself, how do I think I will remember that year? And is there something that I have taken on that's going to be unique and challenging and big and exciting in a way that you'll remember in the years ahead? I produce content on self-development at Midlife. So if you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing so that you'll see more. Until next time, thanks for watching.